The 15th anniversary lecture of the Crusade for Justice started with the national anthem, prayer, and a welcome address by the organizer and founder of Crusade for Justice, Barrister Richard Wankwo.
When the planning committee gathered to appraise the theme and topic for this year's lecture, several issues came to our minds. But when at the end of the day, we finally zeroed in on the theme, celebrating the Nigerian woman, a hallmark of excellence, as well as the topic, combating domestic and sexual violence through judicial actions and activism, it immediately dawned on every member of our committee that the right decision has been made. The urgency in that decision became apparent from the responses we received from our resource persons and the media. The sudden upsurge in cases bordering on this twin challenge appears inexplicable, and therein lies the huge task before this team of Amazons who have graciously acceded to our request to fly the flag in this year's lecture. We appreciate. We are all aware that our courts and police stations all over the country are hugely inundated with cases of this nature. And the challenges before our speakers and contributors, including our Amazon musketeers who are all exceedingly knowledgeable, experienced, and great actresses in the field in these aspects of law, are to appraise all the dynamics at play here and profile solutions with deep Socratic blend. However, one is compelled to ask the following questions. What are our courts doing, really, to contain and drastically rein the forces at play here? What are the non-governmental organizations doing to arrest these developments? What about our gladiators in the National Assembly? Are they really up to this task while constantly bickering for allowances and emoluments? At individual levels, what are we doing in our homes, offices, and business environments to effectively curtail this malady? These questions are endless, and it seems that we have left undone those things which we ought to have done, and have consistently and assiduously done those things which we ought not to have done. But we are persuaded by the extremely commendable and result-oriented stance taken by the Lagos State government in addressing these issues. And we believe that in itself, that represents the most revolutionary and intellectually driven intervention with a firm political resolve to contain this fast-spreading virus. Admitting that these problems exist at the governmental level is the first practical step towards finding a solution.
The chairman of the event, Professor Ernest Ojukwu, SAN, was unavoidably absent, but was represented by Paul Ananaba, SAN, who anchored the various segments. The event tagged Celebrating the Nigerian Woman, a hallmark of excellence, was graced by the governor of Lagos State, Southwest Nigeria, Akinwumi Ambode, who was ably represented by the Permanent Secretary for Women Affairs, Abiola Adetutu Liade.
We have units in the Ministry of Women Affairs that handles domestic violence too. They do come over, couples come over when they have cases between husband and wife, and we do counsel them. But like Titi just said, how do we make sure that they don't come back again? That once we counsel them, there was one we handled yesterday. They came, the husband was saying the wife was slapping. It is the wife that is slapping him. And the wife is saying, no, the man is not attending to her. She's treating her. But after they came, the man was even saying, I think I'm going to commit suicide. ask why. Has it gone to that extent that you want to commit suicide because your wife is slapping you? This is a serious issue. But after counseling both of them, to my surprise, before they left, both of them agreed. After counseling them, letting them know what the wife is doing, you need to be submissive. You need to regard your husband and respect him. The husband too, they told him his own side of his own shortcomings. Well, at the end of the day, both of them now agreed that we go back. They even hugged themselves. Both of them hugged themselves and they agreed to go back home and settled all the issues. So what I'm now saying is, after that has happened, does that mean everything has been settled? That it will not happen again?
Formidable women rights activist and legal writer Boma Ayomide Alabi raised controversial issues bordering on Nigeria's local legislation on marital rape and child marriage.
The word child and marriage, those two words should really not be together under any circumstances. So is that another guise for domestic and sexual violence? Harmful traditional practices and the import of judicial intervention, because that lexicon is only part of our space now, thanks to the judiciary all the way to the Supreme Court. And Lagos State, the trailblazing state, in all areas of best practice. And please convey my very warm wishes and congratulations to the governor and the rest of the team of Lagos State, because this is a state that really means well for its citizens. The Marriage Act, under which the majority of us have contracted and entered into marriage relationships, is it fit for purpose in today's world and what we know about the rights of individuals, particularly women? Is that act fair? Is it time we took another look at it? And then I'll conclude with my own thoughts. And some examples. So, starting with definitions, like I said, domestic violence, also known as domestic abuse, battering, or family violence, is a pattern of behavior which involves violence or other abuse by one person against another in a domestic setting. It may also be termed as intimate partner violence when committed by a spouse or partner in an intimate relationship against the other spouse or partner. And it can take place in heterosexual or in other jurisdictions, same-sex relationships. So domestic violence can also involve violence against children and the elderly. And it takes a number of forms, including physical, verbal, emotional, economic, religious, reproductive, and sexual abuse. So let's be clear, it's not just physical battering. Verbal abuse is domestic violence. Emotional abuse is domestic violence. Religious abuse is domestic violence. Reproductive abuse is domestic violence. And it can range from, like the subtle and coercive to the ones we are more familiar with, which is the violent physical abuse. It can range from insulting your partner, trying to lower their self-esteem.
Titilola Vivo Adeniyi, coordinator, Lagos State Domestic Violence Rescue Team, also spoke on how the judiciary can help combat domestic violence.
We mustn't forget that most of these offenses are actually bailable offenses. Unfortunately, survivors, when they approach us, they expect if they report a case today, they expect the perpetrator to be sentenced tomorrow. And if we go to court tomorrow, and the magistrate, obviously because they don't understand what's going on, the magistrate imposes bail conditions, and then they come back and say, the perpetrator won. And you try to explain to them that no, it's a bailable offense. So they are obviously innocent until proven guilty. So they too, they have rights, and they have to get a lawyer to represent them and all of that. But the point is, even though these are bailable offenses, by virtue of the fact that rape and defilement and sexual assault by penetration carry up to life imprisonment, I genuinely believe that judiciary, magistrates and judges should be encouraged to impose more stringent bail conditions, because this will serve as a deterrent to perpetrators of rape and domestic violence. The same way we see in the papers, 20-year-old boy defiled 2-year-old girl, or 50-year-old man raped 70-year-old woman. We should also see that this person appeared in court and certain bail conditions, very stringent conditions, were imposed. And I'm happy to note that we're seeing that actually in the Lagos State Judiciary. You're seeing 5 million. You're seeing 2 shorties. One must be a civil servant, not below grades 15. So we are seeing judicial activism through the conditions being imposed. Okay, so then we go to sentencing. Majority of the sentences that have been imposed, I believe the maximum I've seen is 21 years for defilement. And let's not forget that defilement and rape actually carry up to life imprisonment. At DS Reality, we believe that the greatest deterrence to rape and defilement is actually convictions. And now not just convictions like that appear to be just a slap on the wrist, but conditions that basically demonstrate the fact that these are offenses against not just the victim, but against society at large.
Executive Director, Office of the Public Defender, Olubukola Oyenike Sala.
A lot of times the police are still trivializing. One of the reasons why that particular law was promulgated by Lagos State was to forestall a situation where the police will state that it's a family matter, go and settle it at home, and then again, a situation where they will say it is just two fighting. It is no longer two fighting. It is no longer a family matter. But we also see situations where even the courts now, maybe they encourage settlement, reconciliation, and all that. So we are also saying, we are also advocating that there should be the judicial discretion to reduce the breach of domestic violence at the end of the day. I want to read out to us a particular article 48.1 of the Council of Europe Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Violence and Domestic Violence, calls upon states to prohibit mandatory alternative disputes resolution processes, including mediation and conciliation in cases of domestic violence against women. We will also like to advocate a situation where the courts give audience to victims of. They look at the demeanor of the victim, give audience to the victim, to hear what she has to say and whatever she has passed through at the end of the day. Talking about sexual offenses, I remember that there's a particular case that one of the courts encouraged that we settle out of court. It was a case of a defilement of a child. And the reason why the child actually endured and condoned what happened was because she was desirous of going to school. She kept quiet and she did not report the case to the auntie who took her to the house of a pastor to take care of the children because the abuser kept on promising that he was going to send her to school. So by the end of the day, when the court now encouraged that the matter should be settled out of court, and he now said he was going to pay a particular amount of money, which he indeed paid. OPD was one of the signatories to that account. And at the end of the day, of course, I wasn't too happy about it, but my attitude was that if that is the price she has to pay for going to school, well, so be it, because at the end of the day, we might not even be able to get a conviction at the end of the day.
Dr. N.N. Chimuba, a lecturer in the University of Lagos, Lagos State, Southwest Nigeria, spoke on the need for the legislature to remove discriminatory sections of various legislations.
When we look at the question of domestic violence and rape from the perspective of human society and the law, we want to see or want to identify power relations. And I'm not surprised that the chairman had mentioned the question of patriarchy and what patriarchy has to do with the subject of discussion. Now, if there is a research that shows Nigeria, that categorizes Nigeria with Iran, Iraq, those great states that are very patriarchal in their culture and attitude. Now, the question we must ask ourselves, and which I draw from the presentation of the chief presenter, Boma, on culture is, do we like the status quo? Do we like it? Do we want to maintain the status quo? Do we like the imbalance in our social interaction in Nigeria and the human relations? Do we like to have male dominance and the women right at the bottom? Now, if we like that, then of course we maintain the status quo and we shut up. But if we don't, then we must make a shift. Now, patriarchy is not unique or peculiar to Nigeria or to Africa. It was in Britain, it was in all of these places. And we as lawyers, we know of the Blackstonian era in which marriage meant that the man and the woman became one. And that one was the man. Yes. So in fact, the woman under the British history, the wife under the British history was effectively a slave, much worse than what we have here in Nigeria. But has it worked? Did it work? They realized that it didn't work. That what is conducive, what promotes the human essence, what promotes human goodness is equality. The equality of the species, the equality of the gender. And when you move from that perspective, then you begin to see a reduction in violence, domestic or otherwise, because it's the same thing that drives both domestic violence and criminal sexual violence propensity. It's the male entitlement, the power, that I want to express power. So there is no other way to express power other than hitting the other person. Whereas you could express power through discussion, through some other form of denial, some other form of privilege taking, without hitting out on the other person.
Former president of the Nigerian Bar Association, Augustine Alege, SAN, drew the attention of the audience to the fact that abuse is carried out by both males and females, adding that nothing justifies violence.
Domestic violence is two ways. Some men dish it out, some women dish it out. And when we start talking of judicial activism, in Lagos, for example, 80% of the bench is populated by women. So if you take a case before a judge or a magistrate in Lagos, no matter how the computer works, out of every 10 cases you file, 8 will go to women. This woman, like most women do, has grown up from when the father comes home as a child. As the mother is welcoming him, he gives some 2 slaps because the food is not ready. So the culture we are talking about, when you now go before that judge who has seen that pattern from childhood, who may be even living in a similar relationship, and you say, my husband is abusing me emotionally, she wants to put you in jail because she's undergoing both physical, emotional, and financial in her own home. And whenever we talk of these issues, we must understand these facts, that the person you are going before may be facing things that are worse than you are facing. So when you say judicial activism, we have done many matters. Say you want to send a man to life imprisonment.
The president of Crusade for Justice, Barrister Richard Wankwo, addressed media after the occasion.
Crusade for Justice is a movement against injustice. There's always a follow-up in most of the issues we deal with here. Some of them are issues that we are handling in our law office and under the auspices of Crusade for Justice. Over the years, we cannot remember the number of people we have taken away from the hands of the infrastructure of indiscipline and injustice that exists within the system. So I think our follow-up is the fact that we've shown some measure of doggedness and determination in pursuing some of these programs, in dealing with some of those cases with all that we can muster in terms of human resources, in terms of financial resources, in terms of consistency, because some of these cases have been going on for a pretty long time, and we are following up, and we are dealing with them, most of them pro bono. And I think that is to the element of challenge in what we are doing, being able to weather the storm despite the prevalence of minuses in the system, being able to hold our fort and push through some of these ideas we have, which has helped a lot of people, especially the prison inmates. And you must also not forget the fact that outside the legal representation, the free pro bono briefs that we have been giving, we have embarked on a massive supply of pharmaceutical products and drugs to some of the prisons. Over the years, in the course of our prisons visit, we noticed that you get to some hospitals within the prisons, you see patients without drugs. And that was what activated our interest in that direction. And over the years, in fact, you noticed from our bulletin that we visited Owerri prison on the 21st of September 2007. It was a massive, the reception was total. The prison was agog, as if something new was happening. And when we went to the hospital, we found out, just like we have noticed in some other jurisdictions, that there is nothing suggestive. Even when you go to the conventional hospitals, at least you will perceive the smell of drugs. But in these clinics, there is nothing to show that these are medical institutions by any stretch of imagination. We gave them drugs. And what is bothering us as an organization is the fact that even when we visited Ikoyi, Kirikiri prisons, Owerri, there is an underlying tone there, and that is the demand for psychiatric drugs. These things are totally lacking in the political equation, and I think that is where institutions like the media should come in and publicize some of these things and sensitize the government, because it appears we have a governance that is one-sided, that they do not appreciate the fact that, like I have said in my address, that the measure of the strength of any society lies in the amount of protection you give to the vulnerable, and that is what we have been doing.
The need for reforms and activism in Nigeria's legal system cannot be overemphasized. The actions of the Crusade for Justice are laudable, since it is not only the government that should raise issues of domestic violence or tackle them. Every citizen has their role to play. Right behind me are delegates that attended the 15th anniversary of the Crusade for Justice, as well as a lecture. The lecture featured a lot of keynote speakers, distinguished members of the Nigerian bar, as well as representatives of various government agencies. The issue was on celebrating the Nigerian woman and focusing specifically on combating violence against women. Itohan, reporting for Loveworld Plus News.